to Two Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. Are you a goofball that loves Giants football? If so, sit back and relax as we talk about the team that both excites and frustrates us so much. And now, here are your goofball hosts, Drew and Rob.
Welcome, fellow goofballs, to Two Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. I am Drew. Unfortunately, Rob is not able to make it here currently, so maybe popping in a little later on there today. But wanted to go over and give you guys all the latest news and rumors here going on with the New York Football Giants here. Offseason never ends with the news, man. Never ends with the news. It's like just when you think, like, hey, we got training camp starting in a few weeks here, OTAs are already over. This is usually the time of the year where there's really not that much going on. Yet for some reason, we still got a ton of stuff going on, guys. Obviously, there's a lot of news involving the Hard Knocks going on right now early in the week. Obviously, the first episode aired. We had our show on that last as far as going over the reactions here. But there's still a lot of reactions coming on here from the NFL world overall to what happened there in episode 1. And still got a lot of talking heads talking about things they project things going to happen during the NFL season here coming up here. So let's get right into it here, talking about what's going on here currently with the New York Football Giants here. First up, it seems the Giants kind of ticked somebody off this week here. And a guy who, let's be honest, is kind of known for being a little emotional there at times. And that's Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown, who is all fired up there for Saquon Barkley. You know, a lot of the first episode, obviously, of the, Hard Knocks offseason there involved Saquon Barkley and talking about the decision to not re-sign him. Obviously, I think episode 2 at least is going to have more on that, maybe even 3, depending on how kind of time frame they're going to be on per episode here. But the Giants, in a lot of people's eyes, kind of seemed like they were going off into a negative way about Saquon. Too many carries, the age, too much money for running back position, things that aren't necessarily wrong. And if you want to look at it from a business aspect, you can say it very bluntly and very nicely and not be a jerk about it. The problem comes into be when you say these things publicly. And I think that's the issue the Giants are having, is that they publicly now said these things. It's out there. There's a guy who busted his tail now for the Giants for a lot of years, fought back from injuries, was the face of the franchise, did all the right things in the media. And at the end of it, the Giants were kind of like, yeah, he's getting up there. We just don't think he's worth the money. We're not even sure anybody wants him at that money. Like, that's basically what the outcome was. So A.J. Brown was pretty fired up there. He said, the Saquon video fired me up, and it wasn't even about me. Tweeted that, and then later on deleted it. He said, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you get yours, fam. So, listen, say what you want about A.J. Brown, and obviously there's people that have valid issues, I think, with him because some of the way, doesn't always act the most professional in the world, but that's a smart move on his end, I think, both team building wise, but also just relationship building wise with Saquon there, to go ahead and say, dude, I got your back. Like, that wasn't right. And like I said, I can get where they would come from that. I really can. Again, I mean, the guy did everything that the Giants asked of him, basically. And in the end, they just didn't think he was worth it. Now, obviously, the last year with Saquon Barkley and the New York Football Giants there was definitely some issues with how he played overall. Battling injuries yet again. Definitely didn't have his best year overall. But in the episode even, they talked about how, even Patrick Mahomes wouldn't succeed with this offensive line. So, you can make the call as well that is it valid for the Giants to go ahead and penalize Saquon Barkley for how he played last year behind that same offensive line. You can make the argument that the offensive line is just as important to the running back as the quarterback was, and you'd be 100% valid in saying that. You could even say that potentially it's even more important for the running back there than the quarterback. Quarterback can move around a little bit, buy a little time. The running back, there's a set play, there's a set spot you're supposed to go, and that offensive line's got to be the one to open that hole there for you. So, I'm definitely a little bit disappointed with the way the Giants talked about Saquon. I could sit there and say, put a little more emotion into it, and I think it would have been fine with it. We said if they had said something like, listen, he did a lot for us, did great things for us, we really appreciate him, we really want to keep him long term. We're just scared about what's going to happen in the next couple of years to him on a huge contract. That'd be fine. But the way they talked about it, here's a bloated free agency class. We don't think he's even the best of that class. Josh Jacobs seemed to be better in their eyes than him. And like I said, not having the injuries and all that stuff. Swift, even who the Eagles had last year, was somebody they were also seemed kind of interested in. It just seemed like I could see how it could be perceived as disrespectful. I don't know if they meant it that way. I don't know if they meant it more as the head reasoning, not the heart reasoning there. But yeah, it's, again, A.J. Brown did the right thing, stood up for a teammate. And I hate to say that about an Eagle, guys. I really do hate to say that about an Eagle. But he did the right thing. You stand up for your teammates. So, wonder, though, who made him take it down. Was it the Eagles? Was it Saquon? I don't know. I'd be kind of curious to find that part of it out there. Saquon may very well be like, listen, guys, I just want to move on. Don't say anything back. Let it go. It's over. I'm done there. I'm Eagle now. That might be his theory. Or, like I said, it might just be the Eagles themselves saying, dude, take that down. Like, we're not getting involved more drama in the offseason. So, either way, like I said, it's an interesting story that, if we find out a little bit more on, could even be more interesting there. So, tell you one guy, though, who definitely did not watch Hard Knocks. And that's a guy who's a New York radio legend there. Chris Mad Dog Russo, who is, of course, now part of the ESPN First Take show. And he's gone ahead and said point blank that he's not watching it because he doesn't like the way it's set up. Here's the direct quote from him. He said, I wouldn't watch that if I had insomnia. The idea that this Hard Knocks with the offseason, that the Giants have editorial control when they put it together, that's ridiculous. You can't do a 5-part series on a football team with the mechanisms in the offseason and then tell me it's legitimate television when the team that you're doing it has final editorial control. You cannot allow the Giants to have editorial control. They want to see it. They want to raise grief. They want to talk to Roger Goodell about it. If you allow cameras in your locker room or in your front offices to show and chronicle offseason, you got to let it go. This is television. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But it's good TV. It's good for football. And the fact that the Giants will tell you what they want to see makes it not worthwhile. I wouldn't watch that if it was in my backyard and I'd close the blinds. That's a little harsh, I thought. I mean, I get where he's coming from. And by the way, I should clarify this because last time we talked about this in a video, there was a commenter talking about it as well, and I've heard other people say it as well. The Giants have editorial control if they feel it leaves them at a competitive disadvantage. That's the exact words that were given to the Giants as far as editorial control. But guys, that's a very, very broad term. I can say anything is a competitive control. Oh, I don't like that scene because it shows how I evaluate players. Oh, I don't like that because it shows what I thought of this person. Oh, I don't like this because it gave, it's so easy to make that claim. So I don't care what wording you want to use. Let me be very clear. The Giants have full editorial control. That is absolute BS if everybody thinks otherwise. And I agree with Chris Russo that what he's saying, as far as it not being fair. But I still think it's not bad television. That's where I think he went a little too far. The fact that the Giants, as we alluded to earlier, they talked about Saquon the way they did. The fact that Mara seemed to really want to keep Saquon. The fact that we got to learn a little bit of how the Brian Burns trade went down here in that first episode. It's still worthwhile football television to watch, especially in the offseason when there's no game to watch. I do wonder if, somebody who wasn't a Giants fan would enjoy it as much as someone like us that is. But, it's for what it is, I like it still. If you're looking for action-packed craziness and all these behind-the-scenes stuff, like, it's not going to be that. There's no NFL team that will let you do that. Why would you let someone know how you evaluate a player? How would you allow someone to know, like, how you set off your offseason and what your plan was? Guys, the offseason is still going on. It's still going on. Like, do you want the Giants to give up something that might affect what they do as they look to maybe get a couple more roster spots filled out or a couple guys signed before the season starts. As players get dropped and guys have to go down to their final roster. I mean, all this still has to play out. Or let's say even if that stuff was hypothetically over and you showed it later on in the year, you're still giving up things that could help another team next year. So, you got to take the good with the bad in this scenario. You're going to get some information that may not be public right now. You're going to get some insight into how some of the stuff went down and some of the conversations. You may get a better insight also to what type of people these people are that are on the show as well, because you're going to get talks and stuff like that. Quite frankly, I mean, one of the things I thought was funny was how often Joe Shane was dropping the F-bomb in there. I mean, that's not something I would have expected. You see this guy at the podium and he's like, straight laced as it can be with every single hair follicle in the right spot and everything. You don't expect that kind of necessarily personality out of him. So, you're going to learn some stuff, guys. But if you're expecting earth-shattering, then you're going to be let down. And I think that's maybe what it was for Chris Russo. He was let down because he was expecting something earth-shattering. I don't think anything earth-shattering's ever happened on any Hard Knocks, let alone this one. Every single team has had some control over it. They're not going to just let anybody know anything going on. That's why a lot of teams don't want to do it to begin with. If they didn't give that, no team would ever do it. The show had been done a long time ago. So, take what you can get from it. Enjoy what you can and what news you can get out of it. But don't expect crazy stories to be coming out of this at that point. You're going to get some insight, but nothing crazy. It's not going to happen, guys. So, all righty. So, last week, guys, we gave you a lot of news on a lot of the, the pundits there, the talking heads talking about our star rookie wide receiver, Malik Nabers, and not talking about him necessarily in a very positive light there. We got some positivity, though, today. We got a little news here for you that PFN, Pro Football Network, expects a huge impact from Malik Nabers. So what they said is, for at least another year, the New York Giants contingent, led by Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, is placing its hopes in Daniel Jones. It's unclear if Jones will rebound after a disastrous 2023 campaign, but he'll need to lean on rookie wide receiver Malik Nabers to accomplish that. Nabers broke out in 2023, distinguishing himself as a venerable three-level threat at the wide receiver position. He can separate and generate RAC in isolation with twitch and explosion, and he has impeccable catch point instincts and proactivity on the attack. So, again, I think what just upsets me when people talk about the rookie season here coming up for Malik Nabers is it seems like they just can't stop talking about Daniel Jones in it. And I get it to a certain degree because there's a huge question mark there at that position. But guys, can we just sit there and say that Malik Nabers is an amazing young talent and we're expecting big things? We don't know how great the first year, but big things? Do we have to sit there and just bash Daniel Jones every single time? And y'all know I'm not the biggest Daniel Jones fan. I don't think he's amazing. I don't think he, even should be on the roster necessarily. The contract's going to force it, but, it is what it is. But these stories, when they come out, they're about Malik Nabers. They're not about Daniel Jones, guys. So, I just wish some of these guys would just kind of focus on that. So, again, we've talked about before where Jordan Addison last year didn't exactly have great quarterback play. He had horrible quarterback play, in fact. They were on like the fourth or fifth string quarterback there at times. They made midseason trade to bring another quarterback, and it wasn't that great either. That's how desperate they were at that position. And Jordan Addison still had 900 yards. Are you telling me Daniel Jones is not better than those guys? Are you telling me that Daniel Jones isn't better than people that were throwing to him at that point? I mean, minus Kirk Cousins, obviously. Obviously Kirk Cousins is still, even though he's not a great player overall as far as if you want to win, but you tell me Nick Mullins is better than Daniel Jones? Josh McDobbs is better? Jaron Hall? I mean, are these guys really better than Daniel Jones? Of course not. So I think it's very realistic to sit there and expect the guy to have, a 1,000-yard kind of season because someone did it last year with worse quarterback play. So quarterback is not an excuse. So I'm looking forward to seeing a good season from Malik Nabers. I'm looking forward to him being a true number one, the first true number one we've had since the days of OBJ. And like I said, I'm thinking that I don't care what's going on at the quarterback position. There are plenty of receivers who have excelled while still having a bad quarterback. Look at what happened in Houston for DeAndre Hopkins all those years. He didn't have a great quarterback. He still made it happen. If Nabers is going to be an elite wide receiver, which for where we drafted him, he should be, then there's no excuse, guys. He's going to get it done because that's what he has to do to establish himself as that kind of receiver in this league. So that's what I think is going to happen there, and I'm not worried about the Daniel Jones factor. I'm worried more about Daniel Jones, but the rest of the receivers that may not be as good as him, like Jalen Hyatt especially, we're trying to, build him up and get him, going to this league. But Malik Nabers should be just hit the ground running. When you're 6th overall, that's what your job is, hit the ground running. So let's talk to a bigger question mark here. So obviously the Giants still have a little bit of cash flow in here ready to go from that, retirement there of Darren Waller. There's been a lot of speculation on what they should do with that money. And now they're saying, at least PFN again, Pro Football Network, suggesting that the Giants should sign Patrick Peterson, which I think is a little crazy, to be honest with you guys here. Spoiler alert there. I think it's a little bit crazy. I mean, you look at who they have out there, and you want to put Patrick Peterson out there, who struggled horrendously last year in Pittsburgh to the point where they were converting him over to a safety. You want to start him instead of Cordell Flott, who's young. We don't know what he got in him. Could be on the way up. You want to start him over Deonte Banks, who had a good rookie year, and you're trying to see if you can make him a number one. Seems a little crazy to me. You want to push him to safety all the way. You want to take out a starting job for Jason Pennick, who's been, to me, a very bright spot for us last year because he played very well, I thought, compared to what, people might have expected from him at the beginning of the year. That'd be stupid to do. You want to bench second-round rookie Tyler Nubin? That's a little crazy. Are you expecting Patrick Peterson, who's, one of the best to play the corner position in the last 20 years, to go ahead and take a reserve role? Maybe. I doubt it. And why would you pay that man a lot of money in that case there? He'd basically be, for all intents and purposes, a coach. But here's a PFN, what they said there. Lorenzo Reyna is the one who wrote the article, said, the New York Giants' weakest area is the secondary, especially cornerback. The 8-time Pro Bowler Peterson, though, would give this defense veteran help at either CB or even safety if brought in. Like I said, I just don't know what kind of help you're expecting from this guy at this point in his career. I mean, honestly, and I hate to say it this way because I want to give respect to the man for what he did for the NFL for all those years. We had obviously, 2 seasons ago, we had Britton Golden on the show there, and he talked extremely highly of Patrick Peterson. And there was no reason. It wasn't like we asked about Patrick Peterson. Like, he made it a point to bring it up, And so, the fact that these guys were teammates years ago and he still felt the need to bring that up shows you what kind of guy that Patrick Peterson is. But, I got to be honest at the same point, though, and say the guy's washed. He had a 60.5 PFF grade, which, to be honest, is not bad at all comparative to the Giants, but it's not good compared to what the NFL does overall. And again, poor play was why they started trying to convert him over to safety. Now, if you had told me prior to this offseason starting, hey, Giants going to get Patrick Peterson and use him in a role like Jalen Mills is, where, you got a guy who can play in the nickel, kind of spot there, dime kind of package, a guy who might play some safety. I'd have been okay with that potentially. But you already got Jalen Mills for that scenario. Unless you don't like what you're seeing from Jalen Mills so far in OTAs and camp and all that kind of stuff, I just don't see why you would make that kind of move personally. And you'd have to have that conversation up front with Peterson saying, hey, you're not a starter. These guys are starters. What I want you to do is come in there, contribute where you can, help these young kids out. And I have no doubt that he'd be a great teammate. Again, just based on what Britton Golden was saying, we talked to him a few years ago. But I don't know if he'd want to take that kind of role. The guy's been the best of the best for how long now? Why would he want to put himself into that kind of position where now he's got to go ahead and sit on the bench and act almost like a coach that occasionally goes on the field? I would think a guy like him might just look to hang it up. No star player wants to be, I hate to kind of use the reference here because the man just passed away recently, but it's the truth on it. Nobody wants to be like the Willie Mays at that point where you're stumbling around in Shea Stadium the last year or 2 year contract, of your career. That stuff is remembered. Look at some of the great players, a lot of the greats, as they call it, are guys that retired early. You didn't see them on their downfall because you never got to see them on their weakest. You only remember their heights. Guys like Barry Sanders, for example. We never saw him falter. We never saw him go down. He didn't want to do that. He just didn't want to play for Detroit. Can't blame him there. But like I said, I'm just not so sure that Patrick Peterson would do that. And I'm not so sure that if he did that, it kind of hurts his legacy long term overall, even though he's definitely a bona fide Hall of Famer. No doubt about that one. So, like I said, I'm not 100% opposed to it, but if you're bringing him in to be a starter, that's when I would say just don't do it. Give the kids a chance. Because if we don't let these guys get a chance to, develop, become the full of what they could be in this league, then it's a lost opportunity in a rebuilding year, guys. If you want to sign Patrick Peterson and you're a team that you think is, got a chance to do something special this year and you're, think your DB room's a little thin and you think you can help out, great. We're not in that kind of position. We're in a position where we're going to be happy to be 500. It's where we're at. Let's be honest where we're at. So, like I said, not the greatest move. I don't see it really helps us that much, except for the veteran leadership there. If you want to get him as a backup and that conversation's had and he's okay with it, then I guess. But as a starter, no, definitely not. Definitely not. But, everybody seems to be talking about our secondary lately and talking about all the issues there. And I'm not sure they're wrong, but I'm not sure they're right. And CBS Sports now goes and as they list corner as the Giants' biggest need ahead of training camp. And we've talked about it before where it's like, I get the need part of it to a certain degree because we had a lot of guys that are very young. But again, we're gonna rebuild, guys. You got to give these kids a chance to play. And it's not like we haven't put assets into this. You got a first-round pick as your number one corner. You got a third-round pick as your number two. You got a rookie third-round pick as your slot corner. You got a rookie second-round pick at safety. And you got a guy that's only been a one-year starter that you picked up in free agency at the other safety position. And your third safety may very well be your fourth-round pick a couple of years ago in Dave Belton. I mean, it's like it's a young secondary. I get that. I don't think they should be listed high. But you can't list them low either and just assume they're going to be crap. That's not exactly fair, is it now? Here's what CBS Sports said exactly. It said, the hope is that second-year cornerbacks Deonte Banks and Trey Hawkins III take the next steps in their respective careers. But the reality is that the franchise probably needs to add another player capable of starting. The construction of the offensive line remains a mystery. Will Jermaine Illuminor eventually take over for former first-round pick Evan Neal at right tackle? If so, what comes of the battery that includes John Michael Schmitz and John Runyon Jr.? So, yeah, I mean, again, that's what they call it the biggest need. And it's weird because they bring up Trey Hawkins, who was a 6th-round pick. I know he was a stud supposedly in camp last year. But I think the Giants realized pretty quickly what he is. He's a project. That's what he was coming in as, a project. He was very raw. He had the physical talents, needed some time. So I don't even know why they're bringing him up in that part of the conversation there. But again, if that's the biggest need, I'll take that as the biggest need as the team, because it's a need that isn't really a need right now. It may be a need next year is what I look at this squad more as. Like, if Banks can't be a number one, or if Flott can't be a number two, or, Newman doesn't look that good, I can get what you say. Next year we might need to look at this position again. That'd be a valid point to make, I think. But this is, to me, the perfect setup for a rebuilding team. And that's what we got to recognize. We are that rebuilding team. You got a guy, again, first-round talent. That's what you have first-round picks for guys to be your number one. Especially at the expensive positions when you can save a lot of money and have to pay somebody $20 million a year to be your number one corner, or $15 million a year. And you can pay the guy a few $1 million on a rookie deal. That's savings. That's smart. I just say, to me, I think it's a little uncalled for there. Real quick, we'll touch on the offensive line too, because they mentioned that there. I don't understand why everybody keeps worried about this. If Jermaine Illuminor takes over, what do they do? Like, what do they do? They moved Jermaine Illuminor over, and the next man up a guard. If Illuminor takes over for Evan Neal, guys, that means Evan Neal sucked again, or he's not healthy. One of the two. Probably a combination of both, to be honest with you guys. If he does that, whoever they put a guard is probably going to be better than Evan Neal was, which means the line has improved. I don't understand why that's sometimes difficult to think. We're still stuck on the idea of what Evan Neal was coming out of the draft when we talk about this sometimes. He's not that player until he proves otherwise. Could he become that? Sure. But right now, if you're expecting that, you're crazy. That's giving you nothing to show you that he could be. At least in the NFL. He was a stud in college, but not in the NFL. So, my hope is that he does play better and does get healthy and, becomes he's not the worst draft pick in Giants history, basically, because he may not be that currently, but he's definitely got a chance to take that crown. That's for sure. But in that case, you got to think guy Aaron Stinney would probably come in and take over at guard, or, Schlappman may come in at guard at that point. He's played the guard in the past, even though he played center in the last couple of years for the Vikings. That's just because of the injuries to Bradbury. Either one of those guys, the way they played last year, would be improvement over what Evan Neal played last year, guys. So, you gotta go ahead and, take that for what it is. It would be an improvement. So, like I said, don't worry about that part of it too much. Worry about the line as a whole, I guess, obviously. Like, it's been bad for years. But if you're worrying about specifically what happens if Evan Neal can't play right tackle and Illuminor moves over, it could actually be a best case scenario, guys. So, all righty. Let's pay the bills real quick there. We got a couple of stuff to talk about here. So, let's go with the bills.
Enjoying the show? Looking for more goofball action? Consider a membership at buymeacoffee.com/2giantgoofballs. Memberships start at just $5 and give you additional goofball access. One-time support payments also available starting at just $3. buymeacoffee.com/2giantgoofballs.
All righty here. So, let's talk about a little more positivity here. There's a lot of positive Kayvon Thibodeau news here to give you guys here. So, always like to be able to give you some positives. Not that the Giants have had a lot of positive lately here. So, NFL.com's Bucky Brooks here decided to include Kayvon Thibodeau to the 24 NFL All Breakout team. So, he's expecting big things here from Kayvon Thibodeau. So what he said is, after amassing 11.5 sacks in his second season, Thibodeau could become the next elite pass rusher to flourish in the Big Apple. This 6'5", 258-pounder thrives as a speed rusher off the edge, and now he's in position to really wreak havoc, lining up across the formation from two-time Pro Bowler Brian Burns. New York's blockbuster acquisition will command most of the attention, as the team's most established edge rusher, leading to more one-on-one opportunities for Thibodeau. With second-team All-Pro Dexter Lawrence also wrecking shop inside, Thibodeau could post monster numbers in year 3. And that's, I look at that and it's like, you'll go, okay, all breakout. Yeah, great. But if you look at it, most of why they're saying it's all breakout is because of Brian Burns and, Dexter Lawrence being Dexter Lawrence. So, it's definitely it's definitely a nice thing to see him on a list like that. But it'd be nicer if they said, oh, well, he did 11.5 sacks last year. We expect better because it's going to his third year. We saw this and this that improved last year. And if that continues, I prefer that kind of write-up. But like I said, I'll take the positive news there. But I do kind of find it funny they said that Burns is the better pass rusher. I'm not so sure if I would say that. Again, Brian Burns is a 2-time Pro Bowler. And I think it might change the guys day from day, game to game, who was the better of the two at that point. Look at Kayvon really did thrive against specific teams last year. Granted, those teams didn't have great offensive lines, and that's definitely what helped him. But he's been kind of the flashy guy that would really take control at certain points against those weaker teams. Whereas Brian Burns doesn't necessarily have that reputation. He's been more of the even keel, steady force kind of guy there. So, I'm not so sure which one is the better pass rusher. Brian Burns is definitely the better player. Let me be clear on that part. He's the better player. But the better pass rusher, I think that's more of a debate than this write-up is giving there. And I do expect big things from Kayvon Thibodeau. And I'm hoping that him working alongside Brian Burns, having new coaching assistants that are helping out the edge room there. Andre Patterson has also been helping with the edge room. They reported as well this OTA. My big thing is I hope Thibodeau becomes better at setting the edge, guarding against the run. Because if he can do that plus post double-digit sacks, then he's a hell of a player. We're going to have 2 Pro Bowl caliber, edge rushers there, which is something most teams would love to have. So it's definitely a good possibility for him to really break out this year. But like I said, I'd like to just hear it more as like, hey, Thibodeau's going to break out potentially this year because he's improving in this. He's got these new coaches. We saw this last year improve. So, we'll see which reason as time goes on, because I do think you'll be able to tell when you watch, especially the All-22 at that point, see who gets doubled and see if that's what happens to help free either Burns or Thibodeau up. See if he's better at setting the edge there, especially against multiple quarterbacks. We're going to definitely play a couple this year. So, I'm definitely looking for big things from Thibodeau, and I'm really, really curious to see how this dynamic works out between those two and who ends up looking like the better player. Because I'm not so sure it's Burns next year, especially at the pass rush specifically. But as of right now, Burns is. Can Thibodeau leapfrog him? I think he can. I think he's got a higher potential and a higher ceiling at that point. It's just whether he reaches that ceiling. But, Bucky Brooks wasn't the only one who talked good about him. It was also a Bleacher Report, their conversation with him, listing Kayvon Thibodeau as the most promising building block for the Giants entering 2024. So, listen, I just said some nice things, I think, about Kayvon a minute ago in the prior segment there. And I think that, again, he's a good pass rusher who beat up on some really bad teams this year, which is what great players are supposed to do. You're supposed to beat up on poor competition. I'm not so sure I'd say he's the most promising building block, though, for the Giants. I still think it's Andrew Thomas or Dexter Lawrence, guys that have already become, that kind of player that you go, okay, I can count on this guy. If he's in there, he's going to be great. Can we say that about Kayvon Thibodeau? Looked great some games. Did this look great every game, though? And again, I expect bigger out of the third year from him there. But I can't call him the biggest building block. I can't. Like, we have literally one of the best blocking left tackles in the entire NFL. That is a key position. Same as pass rusher. So you can't say it's a positional value thing. we have literally the best nose tackle in all of football. The best. Like the guy, if you look at his stats compared to other people that are pure nose tackles, I'm not talking guys that move around. You know, there's some level of that with some of the guys who were also defensive tackles. I'm talking a pure nose tackle. There's nobody that comes close to what Dexter Lawrence does in that position, guys. Now, you can argue a little bit about positional value on that one there, guys. But you can't argue with what he does. And positional value or not, I'm going to take the best guy at his position over a guy who's up and coming that you hope gets better. That, to me, just doesn't make much of a sense there. And you could sit there and say age even, okay? Like I would get that part of it. You say, oh, Kayvon Thibodeau's there because he's going to his third year. But guys, he's 23 years old. Andrew Thomas is 25. Dexter Lawrence is 26. So these guys are literally in the prime of their careers here for another half a decade. It's not like they're 30 and Thibodeau is 22. Like I would get that if there was that bigger age gap there. So to me, it's Andrew Thomas and it's Dexter Lawrence. Now that's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, to revisit next year. Because if Malik Nabers is what I think he is, you could sit there and say Malik Nabers is the building block. He's the biggest building block there for the Giants there. And if that goes that way, that's going to be a fun year for the Giants, guys. But I really think that's what the conversation could be next year. You can't call him a building block when he hasn't played in the NFL yet. That's the only reason I didn't include him in the conversation prior there. But yeah, like I said, I'm not so sure Kayvon Thibodeau is the best building block for the Giants. But I still think he's an important piece for the Giants. I think he's an up-and-coming player. I don't think we've seen him at his best yet. And that's mostly because of him still having to fix those issues with setting the edge and stopping the run, especially the mobile quarterbacks there. But again, great player. Not necessarily our best building block, though. I think that is taking it a little bit far there. Speaking of things a little far, let's talk about something far out. Because we have ESPN dropping their 2025 mock draft here, which I know what you're thinking probably. It's way too early, right? Yeah, it is way too early, but they're still doing it, and people are still talking about it, so we want to bring it up to you guys there. And, of course, the conversation till Daniel Jones either shows otherwise or, they tell otherwise is going to be the fact that we need a quarterback, guys. Like, no one really thinks DJ is the long-term answer. We saw on the Hard Knocks there where Joe Shane kind of alluded to the fact that we need to find out what Daniel Jones is and what his his top end is, because the Giants still don't feel like they know. So, assuming Daniel Jones is what I think most of us do think, and that he's a guy who is an NFL quarterback, but not necessarily an elite quarterback, this could make some sense for them to go, like, we need a quarterback here. So, here's the ESPN write-up. They said projected trade. Giants come up to number 1 overall. Says we might not have a generational talent like Caleb Williams in the class, but there are some really good quarterbacks. And given that the Patriots just used a 2024 top 3 pick on Drake May, I'd bet they'd be listening on trade offers if they were to have the top pick next year. I like the idea of the Giants moving up, and the trade package could look similar to what Carolina sent to Chicago in 2023. When the Panthers slid up to number 1 from number 9. They said, I have the Giants dealing their number 6 pick, second rounder in 25, first rounder in 26, and a second rounder in 27 to get this done. That'd be giving a lot first off, guys. Oof. Anyway, they said, New York Giants, number 1 overall, select Carson Beck, quarterback out of Georgia. We said the Giants threw 15 TD passes last season, 5th fewest in the league, and Daniel Jones is coming off a season-ending ACL injury, but the team is running it back this year. Veteran Drew Lock was added as a backup, but there still isn't a long-term answer under center on this roster. So the front office might get aggressive in finding one. Beck, my QB number 1 in the class at the moment, is a steady pocket passer with a big arm and a great processing speed. He is primed for a breakout season after throwing 24 touchdown passes and completing 72.4% of his throws in his first season as a starter in 2023. Interesting move. let's look at it kind of in two different parts here, because that's what you got. You got two different parts here. You got a trade. So we got to talk about the trade here first. So the Giants, in their scenario, were picking 6. So they're basically expecting us to be just as bad this year as we were last year, which I think, first off, I don't think that's to be expected. I think that'd be a little disappointing considering all the injuries we had last year. We got to assume that we'd hopefully have less, which I think puts this, honestly, I think we'll have like a mid first round pick, which would not help this trade. We have to give up more if that was the case. But so we're giving up a 6th overall pick, so the second round pick for that year, the first round of the following year, and the second round of the year after that to get it done. So you're giving up 2 firsts and 2 seconds to go to number 1. And it's a steep price, guys. It really is. I think that if you make that move, you better know what you got. Like, that's got to be a move you make because you know damn well that this is a really good player and this is the guy that's going to lead your franchise for the next 10, 15 years. Because anything short of that is a huge disappointment, guys. Like, that's how sure you have to be, because you're just giving up so much to get this player. Now, as far as the player overall, Carson Beck, again, he's played 1 year starter, as they said there in their write-up. It depends on what he does this year at Georgia. I like the first year he had. I think he's not a bad, quarterback, obviously. I just don't know what his ceiling is because we only have the 1 year. And I think that's what determines whether or not I think it's the right move in this scenario is how does he play at Georgia this year? So I kind of put this in the too early to tell column. But I'll tell you this, overall, the history on trading up and making these kind of trades for quarterbacks has not worked out well. Whether you're talking about, guys like Mitch Trubisky, Trey Lance, like these picks don't typically work out. And you give up so much. It's hard to build a team when you're giving up basically 3 additional premium picks that, you figure the 1 and the 9 is they consider that as both premium picks, but you're giving up 3 additional premium picks that are guys that are supposed to build your team around. That's a lot to give up. If I was the Patriots and Drake May looks even serviceable this year, I would take this offer in a heartbeat. But whether or not I'd make this move would depend probably, again, on how good Carson Beck looks his second year at Georgia. But it would also be, how the rest of the class looks. If I think that Carson Beck is by far the best quarterback coming out of the draft next year, and I'm hell-bent on getting a quarterback, then yeah, probably make the move if that's what it costs, because without a quarterback in this league, you got nothing. But if I think, like, here's Carson Beck and here's the next guy, whether it's Sanders, whoever at that point, like they're that close, they're kind of neck and neck, then why would I give up 3 additional draft picks? That doesn't make much sense. So time will tell. But if I had to make a decision right now with the knowledge that I have, I would say no. I would say don't make that move, because history is why. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And unfortunately, people don't typically do very well when they make these kind of trades. So, all right, we got one more bit of news here for you guys. And that's talking about Daniel Bellinger. Daniel Bellinger apparently is besties now with George Kittle. I knew they had a relationship. Obviously, Bellinger has gone the last 3 years to camp there, tight end camp there with Kittle and Kelsey and Greg Olsen there. But yeah, now he's apparently going to be working out with him this summer, which is nice to hear. I mean, listen, if he's even part as good as Kittle, if he's like 75% of Kittle, that's a win for the Giants, guys. And I don't insinuate that just because they work out together, he's going to become just as good as Kittle or the same type of player as Kittle at that point, obviously. But it can't hurt, because whatever Kittle is doing obviously puts him in good shape to play because he plays very well. Whatever Kittle works on obviously helps him become a better tight end because he's a better tight end of this league. So it just can't hurt. So here's Bellinger's quote he said on it. He said, he's fortunate enough to have built his own property and a little field and gym there. So he's a big advocate for getting guys together, getting better together. I'm going to go back there with him and get some good work in Nashville, nice and hot, nice and humid and hot. He's built this nice barn with a weight room in there. It's got 3 stories with a bunch of recovery stuff upstairs and a college-like gym on the bottom with a 50-yard field outside. So, first off, kudos to Kittle there, guys. I know we talked mostly just Giants here, but kudos to Kittle on doing that kind of move there. Like, go ahead and build that kind of property up. Like that's pretty damn impressive there. So, but I'm glad to see Bellinger doing that. I'm glad to see him taking his craft serious like that. You know, I think regardless of what happens, I think that it's a key thing that you're seeing him put the work in. That means that whatever the ceiling is going to be for Bellinger, he has a higher chance of reaching it because he does moves like this, going to the tight end university, going out to work out with George Kittle separately in summer. Not everyone does that. You know, we talked about when they said that, you know, he was going there, that Theo Johnson was on the list. That's not to say that Theo Johnson isn't working hard this offseason or, you know, working with his own trainer. But I would like to see him there. It's an awesome program. Like I said, it's really kudos to those guys for setting it up because a lot of guys don't want to do that. They want to help out people they're competing against. And these guys have done that. So, you know, again, kudos to them. Good for Bellinger working his butt off there. Hopefully good things from him. And I think him and Johnson could be a nice 1-2 punch. I really do. They're very different types of players. And sometimes that's what you need, especially the tight end position, because there are not many tight ends who do everything well. So if you can get guys that are good at different things, sometimes it's that combo that just works right, guys. That's what I'm really hoping from these two there. So, all right, we got a couple comments here from Deb. I'm going to go over here with you guys there because I always like to go over people's comments. Deb said, Barkley agreed to see what his offers were, then go back to the Giants, and he did not do that. Maybe they didn't like that. We'll see. I mean, I'm not so sure that's what happened yet, to be honest, only because we haven't seen that part of it yet. We saw that little bit in the trailer that people are thinking that, and it's definitely a distinct possibility based on that conversation. But trailers are sometimes made to kind of intrigue you. And until that happens, to be the parameters of it, I'm going to try to withhold judgment as best I can against Barkley because, especially the way the Giants were talking about him, let's be very frank, the Giants weren't matching that offer the Eagles gave. And if the Giants did offer him anything or would have been anywhere near it, would have been nowhere near that. So, and she also says Russo is right. Like I said, he's half right. He's half right because if you didn't give a team some editorial abilities in those, none of the teams would show up. None of them would go on the show, like, unless they were absolutely forced by the NFL. And even then, it would be such a horrible experience because they'd do everything in their power to, you know, make it a pain in the butt for the film crew and everybody else there. So, you know, it's double-edged sword there. You want content, so you got to let them do it like that. But you want good content, which is more difficult to get when the team has editorial rights on it. So, you know, we'll see what happens there overall there. But I'm curious to see what happens in the second week here. As long as we get less talk about peanut butter jelly sandwiches, more about the actual offseason moves itself there, guys. All right, well, that's going to call it a show here for you guys. Definitely appreciate you guys watching and listening in. And you know, hope you guys are having a great 4th of July. Everybody, remember to be safe out this weekend. We'll be back again Monday to our regular scheduled time that we're back to, so 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, we're always live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter/Twitch, Twitter/X. I always do that. I don't know why I messed up. Twitter/X, Twitch, and of course, my LinkedIn profile. And of course, as always, we are available the next day on all the audio podcast platforms. So Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, all the big ones there. So if you haven't already, do me a favor, please hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that share button there. What definitely does a big thing there to help and push out the content to everybody there. Appreciate you guys listening in as always, Giant fans. Go G-Man!
Thanks for listening to Two Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. We appreciate your support.
Thanks so much.